seen the footage of
You've seen footage of
shredded children's bodies. And that's my taxpayer dollars. I'm going to bomb those kids.
So I think we should kill them all, if that makes you feel better. Everybody,
Yes. Do you have a
Hamas and the Palestinians have been attacking Israel for 20 years, and it's time to pay the price.
Well, last night, an elected US lawmaker, Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee, called for the complete annihilation of Gaza. Now, it's important to keep in mind that even though you hear him very clearly saying we should kill them all after a pro-Palestinian protester mentioned our bombs shredding the bodies of children, it is true that after that statement, he said everybody in Hamas to clarify. Maybe he had a moment of realization, a moment where he realized, hey, maybe this is gonna get me in some trouble. So everybody in Hamas, everybody in Hamas. But if someone is talking to you about literal children and how their bodies are being shredded by US bombs, maybe take a moment to address that, just a moment. Now, you might think that after such hateful statements, Ogles would be facing some more media attention, but you'd be wrong. So the story broke last night, but as of this morning, our producer, Taylor Ellis, who produced this story, looked into any national outlets that had maybe reported on it, and he found nothing. He found nothing over at CNN, NBC News, Fox News, Politico, The Hill, The New York Times, or The Washington Post. Now, to be fair, he checked this morning. Maybe they've published something since then, but that kind of statement is, I feel that it should be covered a little more widely because it's so callous and it's so dismissive of the lives of literal children, especially coming from a Republican lawmaker who I would assume has some very strong thoughts when it comes to reproductive rights. And we'll get to that in a moment. But before we do, let me just remind you that Rashida Tlaib, of course, was censured for using the phrase from the river to the sea. Ogles has not even been, hasn't issued a statement. He hasn't gotten any real backlash other than people who have been outraged by it online. But let's take a moment to learn more about him, okay? So yesterday wasn't the first time he called for devastation in Gaza. Here's a clip from last month.
If Israel decides that they need to pay back the Palestinian people and Hamas in biblical proportions, that's up for the Israeli government and the Israeli people to decide, not a woke and weaponized Biden administration.
It's interesting how he always starts with devastation for the Palestinian people, right? And I think that for people like Ogles, the two are synonymous. And that's where the problem lies, because there is a difference between civilians and Hamas. There's a huge difference. And so while I totally agree that those who committed the atrocities on October 7th absolutely should be brought to justice, the idea that the Palestinian people, including the children who have been suffering as a result of this war, the idea that they should suffer is ludicrous to me. And look, I want to put it in our own terms. So think about some of the war crimes that were committed under the Bush administration, and to be quite frank, also under the Obama administration. Remember, Obama ordered a drone strike of a suspected terrorist who actually was a United States citizen. Now, do I think that we should have just let him go? No. But every American citizen is supposed to get due process. You don't get to do extrajudicial killings, and that's what Obama did. He then proceeded to do drone strikes on his children as well. But if the countries that our government had committed war crimes in decided to retaliate by targeting civilians in the United States, would we be okay with that? We wouldn't be okay with that, right? That would be unfair. We just had, previous to this current administration, 4 years of Trump. I just don't want to be, let me put it this way. I think it's unfair to use a government as a sign of what the civilians are. Now, in a democracy, you could maybe make the case, well, a democracy, they voted this person in. But we know how our democracy works, okay? We know what it's like every election cycle. It gets harder and harder to have better options in the presidential elections. But look, my point in bringing all this up is to say that civilians are off limits, period. That includes civilians in Israel, that includes civilians in Gaza, the West Bank. But that's not the way Ogles thinks. So he also introduced a bill to designate UNRWA, the humanitarian aid organization that provides the bulk of humanitarian aid to Palestinians, a terrorist organization. And he also called to defund the UN as a whole. He tweeted this last year. It was a story by the Washington Post. The Israel-Gaza war is still in its first week, but some people in the United States and around the world have lost their jobs or have faced discipline or backlash for their criticism of Israel. He quote tweets that and says, good. So not a defender of free speech at all, right? But when conservatives are targeted for their speech, it's a big controversy, it's a huge injustice. But people getting fired, losing their livelihoods simply for sharing their perspectives on this war, they should get fired, apparently. All right. And there are some other issues that I think are worth looking into. So let's take a gander at this compilation video that Taylor put together for us.
We have to work together to cut every single dollar to slash the Department of Education. As your congressman, I'll fight for full and total repeal of Obamacare. Next thing we need to do is go after gay marriage.
So not for exceptions for rape or incest.
Well, statistically, those are not even part of the conversation. But that's a red herring used by the left and radicals.
Is there any area that you would immediately cut spending on or the budget of?
Your social programs. I mean, those are going to be painful. When you look at our Medicare, Medicaid programs, those costs have to come down.
We have to get the government, the federal government, out of health care. So it's time that we get rid of the Department of Education. It's time that we repeal Obamacare. It's time that we get rid of Health and Human Services. Drill, baby, drill. We drill on federal lands. You can drill in the Gulf. You can drill in my backyard. As a member of Congress, we'll empower the states to take action on those issues, whether it's guns, marriage, or abortion.
As my father would say, trash, absolute trash. I mean, at least he's consistent. Doesn't really care about the well-being of Palestinian children. Doesn't seem to care about the well-being of American children either. And the saddest part about all of this is that Ogles is far from the only elected official to make such disgusting remarks about the Palestinian people. Here are, in order of appearance, Representatives Max Miller, Representative Brian Mast, and Senator Tom Cotton.
Rashida Tlaib has I don't even want to call it the Palestinian flag because they're not a state, they're a territory that's about to probably get eviscerated and go away here shortly, as we're going to turn that into a parking lot.
I think when we look at this as a whole, I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II. There's not this far stretch to say there are very few innocent Palestinian civilians.
First of all, food and water cut off, a humanitarian crisis and destruction there.
Shannon, as far as I'm concerned, Israel can bounce the rubble in Gaza.
So do you guys understand why I have a difficult time believing a single right-wing politician when they allege that they consider life beginning at the moment of conception, that they consider a fertilized egg a human that's worthy of the same rights and protections that we have? Because their carelessness in regard to the kids that are dying, it's amazing to me. Remember, Hamas was not elected by the majority of Palestinian civilians, not even close. Hamas was elected back in 2006. We know that half of the population in Gaza is under the age of 18. So minors who had nothing to do with the election of Hamas are being slaughtered right now as we speak. And these politicians have no problem basically referring to them as something that is synonymous with Hamas. It's just so wrong. It's so gross. And at some point, I just want the American government to look at itself in the mirror and really ask itself, do I like what I see? Is this a good reflection of what this country is? I'm embarrassed by it. I just wish they had enough concern for human life, real human life, living, breathing people, okay, to want to provide some protection for them, because our names are on those bombs. Honestly, in some cases, quite literally, because the IDF literally wrote Cenk Uyghur's name on one of the bombs that they dropped in Gaza. But what I really mean is the made in USA tag on those bombs, it's not something I'm proud of. The fact that those bombs are being dropped on residential areas, on hospitals, on mosques, on refugee camps, it's not something to be proud of. It's deeply, deeply shameful and immoral. And what I see in those compilations that we just provided for you is a group of people who have poor moral character, to say the least. And if I were able to use more vulgar language on this show, I would. But just know that's what I have in my head right now.